Mike Visceglia has spent over 30 years as a recording and touring bassist and has been the bassist for singer-songwriter Suzanne Vega for 24 years. Mike is the author of A View from the Side and is currently working on an autism awareness CD featuring Jackson Browne and Marshall Crenshaw, to name a few, and is still, in his spare time, one of the most requested bass guitarists around today. First of all, great to see you.
Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Bass guitarist.
Bass guitar, not upright, bass guitar, yes.
An important part of a band.
Well, in my opinion, the most important part.
Why a bass guitarist? Well, couldn't you be like a classical one or something?
Well, I mean, it's funny that I actually started as a classical guitarist. I mean, very early on. The bass sort of happened by accident. And it's a funny story because my sister, who's a year younger than me, and so I was about 11 and she was about 10, and we were living in New Jersey, and she befriended the Hot Shot band in that town, which were all like 14 years old. So that was a big thing. They were all teenagers, and they were rehearsing in my garage because my father was such a music-phile and a supporter of musicians. So one day,
the neighbors would hear it all the time.
Oh yeah, well that was that was part of it. That was part of it. But one day they had a big fight with their bass guitar player, and he walked out of the rehearsal.
But they liked it, aren't they?
Well, then my father said, well, hey, I have an idea. If you want to keep rehearsing in our garage, you're going to have to audition my son on bass guitar, which is something I never played before. And I was like freaked out. So he drove me to the music store, bought me a bass guitar and said, do it. And I was like, okay. And I did it, and I got the gig, and then that was it. From age 11, I've never done anything else.
But it's a rare craft, isn't it, too? I mean, it's a very important part of a band.
Yes, it's more conspicuous by its absence. When a lot of people don't exactly know what it does, but when you go to see a show and it's not there, people realize there's a big part of the music that's missing. But it actually helps define the rhythm and harmony that's going on in the song.
You've played with some great artists. I mean, Springsteen, to name just one of them, Marshall Crenshaw, the whole lot, and Suzanne Vega for 24 years,
quite a long time,
and forever thereafter.
Well, it's still going on, so we'll see.
Which is really rare in this day and age because musicians move around. Yeah,
it's true. There's only about 15 people I know in the business as sidemen that have relationships as long-lasting as what I have with her.
Sidemen?
Sidemen.
Okay, explain what are sidemen?
By definition, they're not the principal artists. You're used to hearing Elton John or Peter Gabriel and Paul McCartney as the big stars, but what a lot of people don't realize is that they have very special relationships with some musicians that have been with them for, in some instances like myself, for the artist, the principal's entire career. And it's a unique relationship because it's not a marriage, obviously. It's not family, obviously. But in some ways it transcends and crosses all of those lines. And in particular with Suzanne, we've seen each other get married, get divorced, have children, relatives die.
It sounds like a country and western song now.
It is. Well, there you go.
The lyrics for one, anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's got its own tale. It's got its own interesting storyline to it, for sure.
You're very creative. You're also an author and a writer.
Yeah.
Tell us about your book.
Well, I decided this whole idea of a sideman and the unique relationship with principal artist was something that I feel hasn't been spotlighted enough. So I decided to develop this concept, which I started by writing a book called A View from the Side, which is the particular perspective of the sideman in relationship to the artist and the lifestyle that sidemen lead professional musicians as kind of these minstrels going around the world leading sort of a cowboy kind of life in a way. And a lot of people don't realize how difficult that actually is to prolong over a long period of time. But so I decided that there were people around that had very, very important stories to tell that are parts of the soundtrack of our lives. We hear these songs, we hear these recordings that mean so much to us, and yet we primarily focus on the principal person, whether it's Stevie Wonder or that's the voice. But a lot of the musicians contributed very, very greatly to these songs, and I think they have stories to tell, so I decided to try to capture some of those stories. Primarily, my first go-around with this book is very bass-centric, so I talked to a lot of bass players, famous bass players that play with Peter Gabriel and Miles Davis and Jackson Browne and people like that. So, and it's, although the book is not about the bass or about playing the bass, it's sort of about their stories and their lives.
And Sting.
And Sting.
Fantastic. Tell us about, how did you get Sting to do the foreword?
I fortunately have a lot of friends in this business, and one of them became Sting's producer for 3 of his albums, and I've known him for quite a while. He's an Englishman named Kipper. That's what he calls himself, Kipper.
Just Kipper.
Just Kipper. And so we were actually in, I think, Hungary. I was with Suzanne Vega, and we were doing a concert in the town center for 75,000 people, something like that.
75,000.
Yeah, it was a sea of people, and it was Sting and Suzanne, and there were a couple of other acts on the bill. So I got to see my friend Kipper, and we were talking, and I mentioned to him that I had this idea, and I was formulating this book, and he said, well, I think maybe I can ask Sting if he wants to contribute something for this. And he happened to have something that he never published or put out there in the public, and he was very generous to give it to me to use for my book. And it's a beautiful little kind of rumination about him and his relationship to his instrument, and I thought it was very touching and great contribution.
Inspirations. Who are your inspirations from moving into the music business and even now? Because we all change, attitudes change and things. So,
right.
So from the start, inspirations and inspirations now. What inspires you?
What inspires me is creatively thinking outside of the box, and that could be in any medium, but particularly in music, I'm inspired by the melding of different influences. Like, for instance, I love ethnic music. I love Brazilian music because it takes some of the best aspects of harmony and jazz and vocal voices, which I love. I love playing with singers, and I made my career playing with singers, and puts it all together with very compelling rhythmic elements that I find just really enriching. But I'm particularly a fan of 20th century classical composers like Ravel and Debussy and Copland, and I find it just endlessly rewarding listening to that stuff, and it somehow informs, even though I'm a pop musician, as it were, that somehow informs my sensibility, and I really try to just bring as much of that aesthetic that I can into my playing, and the various people that I work with, either as a producer or as a player, or as even a writer, which I'm writing music now also.
You have a CD out at the moment. You're performing around New York.
Yeah.
With an Australian
singer that I met in New York.
Fiona McBain.
Right.
And then there were 2.
Right.
Tell us about some of the tracks on the album.
Well, the whole idea with this is I met Fiona. She performs in a band that's doing pretty well called Olabelle, which is kind of an Americana roots band, even though she's Australian. And her co-partner in that is Amy Helm, who's Levon Helm's daughter. Levon Helm from the band. The legendary band, the drummer, singer, and composer.
Sort of helps her career.
Yeah, exactly. And so I met Fiona in New York just through the music scene, which I've been a part of for a lot of years. And I came up with this idea of trying to do music for just bass guitar and voice, which has only been, I think, hinted at, never really kind of fleshed out with any degree.
That's a real challenge, isn't it?
It's very challenging. When we got together, there was an immediate chemistry, so I said, well, now what material are we going to do? Because neither of us at the time had material that was appropriate for that kind of presentation. So I said, why don't we try to do eclectic arrangements of wonderful, timeless songs that we both love? And that's what we did. We went out, we found, scouring our collections, and found songs that we thought were just, will live forever. So we have our versions of interpretations of Beatles, of Joni Mitchell, Ricky Lee Jones, Hoagie Carmichael, Tom Petty. It's kind of all over the place, but we took really great songs. Even Nick Cave.
Nick Cave.
I actually found a new appreciation through this experience for Nick Cave. So I arranged the songs just for bass guitar and voice, and getting a lot of really good response from it. We've been performing as a duo around New York, and I found out that Tom Petty, who has a satellite radio show, has gotten a hold of this record and just plays it all the time.
So he's your new agent?
Yeah, he's kind of my new champion, our new champion. And I keep getting messages that Tom Petty played your record again on his radio station.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah, so I love it. I love how you can do this small little project and put it out in the world, and it finds its own kind of level, and people find it, and that's a really interesting thing about, especially through the internet and digital technology.
Isn't it nice to you have respect for the artist and for the industry, and it's also reciprocated?
Yeah.
You have another CD that you're working on for an autism project.
That's right.
Jackson Browne, Marshall Crenshaw, to name a couple. Tell us about that.
Well, I was hired to produce a record for an autism awareness project with these 3 writers that wrote about 15 or 16 songs dealing with various aspects of the autism experience, autistic experience. I think one of the writers has an autistic child, and they really wanted to express themselves, so they hired me to produce this record. And because of they wanted celebrity singers, pop singers, to sing the music that they already wrote. So because of my contacts in the business, I was able to reach out to a lot of people, and fortunately a lot of them responded positively. So I've been working on this record, and we're about 10 tracks into it now, which is very close to finishing, and it's going to be hopefully mixed and mastered in about a month, and we'll find a distributorship through some kind of autism affiliated foundation. And we have Jackson Browne and Marshall Crenshaw and Dar Williams and Jonatha Brooke and Ola Bell with Fiona and Amy, and a singer named Richard Julian, Mike Viola and Dan Byrne. There's quite a lot of folks on it, and a really good representation from the an eclectic array of singer-songwriters. And I think it's going to be really interesting music, because it's not all one style. I tailored the arrangements and the production to try to showcase the specialties of each of the singers.
30 years. You started off basically when there was cassettes and records.
Oh, cassettes, records for sure, yeah.
And then now we have just downloadable music.
We have sound files. Yeah.
That's right. But how's it changed for you? I mean, as a sideman.
As a sideman, it's actually in some ways it's gotten better, because what artists have had to rely more on is the live experience. Since their CD sales have plummeted, and a lot of record companies have gone out of business, a lot of artists have been dropped from their label deals, that stream of revenue has lessened dramatically. So a lot of artists have had to rely on playing live to make their living. So obviously, me as a sideman, as a bass player, that's been a benefit, because there seems to be a lot more live performance avenues open now than there were before.
As a performer, though, as a principal performer, it's opened up a new audience for you, because to make the record, it's a lot cheaper, because
Absolutely.
The distribution is a lot greater.
Right.
So I suppose there's also the upside of it too.
There's absolutely an upside for a performer, although in these transitional times, a lot of them haven't found their footing yet. A lot of them have been marginalized, and they're looking for new ways of doing business, as everyone in the record selling business is trying to find a new way to deal with marketing and promotion of music. It's no longer going to be the way it used to be with first records, then CDs, and CD stores, which are going out of business left and right. It's going to have a lot to do with the internet and specific downloads. And now there actually are even recordings that aren't even being released in hard copy anymore. The artists are just putting together download files and releasing their records, as it were, their compilation of music, only in MP3 form.
Interesting. They still say that the record is probably about the best sound you'll get compared to a CD, and yet they say the CD is a much better, more natural sound than the file.
That's right, and it's true.
Yeah. So has the quality affected the quality?
The sad thing is that younger audiences today don't have the reference points to know what they're actually missing. And it's very sad because to me, the record album experience, the analog record album experience, was very interactive. You had to actually go and put a record on and physically put it on. And you had to sit there and listen to it, and when that record was over, you had to physically go turn it over. So it was interactive, and it kind of like almost forced you to pay attention to the music, and because of the whole other world of album art and liner notes, I became, and a lot of other people became, big fans of that. So I love album art. I love album liner notes written by really erudite, informed people about the music. Great analysis and in some ways poetic and transcendent. That went to CD, which in the digital world lessened both the quality of the audio experience and also the quality of the interactive experience with the music.
And the writing was so small on those CDs. It's
exactly.
Like,
so it wasn't as much of a that quality experience that I wanted. But that it was even a blessing in a way compared to what's going on now, where younger audiences don't even listen on stereos anymore to get a high fidelity experience. They listen on iPods and earbuds or their phones, and in their cultural mores, the not only the experience has been devalued, but the music itself has become devalued, and in some sense kind of a throwaway, disposable commodity.
Do you still enjoy what your craft is as much from when you started now?
As I get older, I realize there's more and more complications in my life as I get older.
Arthritis.
To kind of keep integrating all of my world, my creative world, into my personal world, and dealing with the travails of just of aging and becoming an older human being, is more difficult. But as far as the process of creation, I'm actually having a better time now than I ever did, because I'm involved in so many different phases of creation with my book and my writing, my website, my partnerships with licensing, and all the things that I do.
If somebody was to ask you, in a word only, how you would describe you, what word would that be?
Inclusive.
Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.